Hi everyone, welcome back to the 16th video in my training series called Understanding EMV. Uh, in this video, we will be looking at the fourth step of the EMV transaction. Okay, so let's do a quick recap of what we've covered to date. So we know that we're doing we are doing an EMV transaction using an EMV card, which is being inserted into an EMV terminal. So technology-wise, we've selected EMV. We've identified, through the use of a candidate list, excuse me, which virtual card or which application will be used to pay for the goods in the transaction, and that's been agreed upon between the terminal and the card. We then had some communication between the chosen virtual card or application and the terminal, in the last video where we discussed some of the pieces of information that were shared, between the card and the terminal. And so where we are today is a phase, the fourth phase or the fourth step, which we refer to as Offline Data Authentication. You may also hear it referred to as CAM, Card Authentication Methodology. And basically, the purpose of this phase is to authenticate that the card is genuine, that it hasn't been counterfeited or cloned. So I think let's get straight into it. So Offline Data Authentication, ODA, or Card Authentication Methodology, CAM, okay, is a process, that uses cryptographic functions and keys and artifacts, which you'll remember back from the EMV issuing videos that we did a few videos back, and basically, as I've already explained, the purpose of this stage or a step is to authenticate the card, right? Ensure that the card is genuine. Okay, so like I said, card is genuine, been issued by a genuine issuer, and has not been counterfeited. Okay, so important thing to note: this is an offline authentication process, and it is left to the terminal for this particular card verification process. It is left to the terminal to conduct the necessary processing in order to verify that the card is genuine. ODA makes use of asymmetric cryptography. Right? Remember our section a few videos back where we spoke about cryptography. We said there's symmetric and there's asymmetric. So in this particular step of the transaction relates to that. So for this video, we are interested in asymmetric cryptography. Okay, so as it stands currently, we are in 2023 right now. There are two valid ODA methodologies. The first one is DDA, which stands for Dynamic Data Authentication, and then there's CDA, which stands for Combined Data Authentication. Back in the day when I started off, around about 2006 or so, or even 2006 thereabouts, most of the cards in the market used a data authentication methodology known as SDA, Static Data Authentication, which was the sort of entry-level cryptographic. It was the weakest of the three data authentication types. What we found was over the years, the schemes, the card associations have mandated that we phase out SDA support. DDA and CDA are currently used, but DDA is also being phased out in favor of CDA. That being said, we will be discussing SDA in detail going forward, and the purpose of this is simply to make our training or our understanding of ODA easier, right? So if the SDA process is very easy to understand, it's very simple to follow, and if you can understand how SDA works, a DDA and CDA can be quite a bit more complex, but if you understand how SDA works, then it's just a matter of sort of understanding the additional complexities of DDA and CDA and building upon your SDA knowledge to better understand DDA and CDA. All All right, so let's get cracking with SDA. So we're in a transaction and we've got two stakeholders at this point in time, right? So we've got two participants. We've got a card, Bob's card, and we've got a terminal belonging to the comic store. Okay. In order for SDA to take place, in order for the terminal to process the SDA function to verify that the card is genuine, certain cryptographic artifacts need to reside on both the card and the terminal. So let's look at the card first. So firstly, the card should have a scheme public key index. Okay, so not the key itself, just the index. So we have one CA public key index loaded on the card, and this is associated to the scheme private key that was used to create the issuer digital certificate. Remember, in asymmetric cryptography, we have key pairs, a private and a public key pair. The private keys are never shared, but the public ones may be distributed, right? So going back, the card has a scheme public index, and what the index indicates is it references the associated scheme private key that the scheme used to create the issue digital certificate, which also resides on the card. Okay, which I'm speaking about now. So the issue digital certificate or the issuer public key certificate also lives on the card. The certificate is a result of the issuer, the bank, taking the issuer public key, okay, submitting it to a scheme like MasterCard or Visa, and they would sign it, right? They would encrypt it using their scheme private key, and they would return the output of that signing, which is now a certificate, which we now refer to as the issuer digital certificate or the issuer public key certificate. Okay. Additionally, for SDA, we need something called a static digital signature or signed static application data. And the signature is a result of taking unique card static data, right? We apply a hash algorithm, SHA1, SHA1, and we produce a hash output of 20 bytes long. Okay. We then sign the hash with a private key belonging to the issuer, the bank, right? What also needs to live on the card is the original card data that makes up the unique card static data string. So the string that was used to generate the static digital signature, okay, it needs to live in the clear on the card as well. Okay. And typically, if you look at what goes into this string of data, you're looking at things like the PAN, which is unique to the card, a PAN sequence number, application expiry date, application effective date, CVM list, the issue action codes, issuer country code, application usage control. Right. This is typical. It's not. I mean, each issuer will make a decision in terms of what piece of data they want to use. But this is the typical implementation thereof. From a terminal perspective, we need to have a scheme public key, or rather multiple scheme public key indexes on the terminal. So remember, we've got a single scheme public key index on the card. The terminal will have multiple public key indexes, and basically, for every CA public key loaded on the terminal, there has to be an associated public key index. So if there are multiple keys, there'll be multiple scheme public key indexes, right? So that just talks about, so basically, if the terminal has 12 scheme public keys, let's assume I've got 4 MasterCard public keys, 4 Visa public keys, and 4 Amex public keys. Then we'll have obviously one public key index. Every public key will have its own index or its own name, and so there will be 12 indexes as well. Okay. Right. So let's look at the processing now. So we know we've got these items that reside on the card, and we know that we've got these items that reside on the terminal. So the first thing that the terminal will do, right? Remember, we're in step 4 of this transaction. Bob is still waiting at the till, completely oblivious to what's happening in the background. Obviously, this happens very, very quickly. It's a matter of microseconds or seconds. So he's not aware that his card is actually being validated to ensure that it's not a counterfeit or clone card. Right. So what the terminal does is it says, okay, card, I know you've got a scheme public key index. So I'm going to look at the scheme public key index. I'm going to compare it to the list, to the multiple scheme public key indexes on me. And basically what I want to do is I want to find the corresponding one. So let's assume that the card has index F1 and the terminal has indexes F1, F2, F3. So it knows, okay, cool. Card has index F1. I do have index F1, which means I've got the corresponding CA public key loader as well. So it knows that as a starting point, it has to use the F1 key in order for it to perform SDA on this card. All right. So we've located which scheme public key to use. We then take the issuer public key certificate, right? So remember, this was the issuer who had sent their public key to a scheme that was signed under the scheme's private key, right? So issuer certificate is the issuer public key signed with the scheme's private key. So the terminal will take the issuer public key certificate. Okay, so it's got a piece of data. The piece of data is the issuer public key, and remember, it's been signed by the scheme's private key. So we now have this. We've identified the scheme's public key, which means we've encrypted with the scheme private key. We can decrypt with the scheme's public key. So that's what the terminal does, right? So it applies the scheme's public key against the issuer digital certificate. It resolves the signing, and what it does is that it obtains that string of data that was encrypted under the scheme's private key. Now, in our case, we know that the string of data is the issuer public key. So we now have derived our issuer public key. Okay, let's move on. The terminal, right, so the terminal applies the issuer public key that it obtained in the previous step to resolve the static digital signature and recover the hash. Right? So remember, we said we've got this static digital signature, which is made up of a string of data that was hashed to 20 bytes, and then that hash was then encrypted under the issuer's private key. So now we're taking the issuer's public key. We're going to resolve that signature, and what we should then end up with is the underlying data, and in this case it's that hash value, that 20 byte hash value that was generated as a result of the SHA-1 algorithm. Right, so what the terminal now does is that it takes the original SDA data from the card, right? And it applies that same SHA-1 algorithm. Okay, so guess what happens? It takes the original data, applies the algorithm, and what this should produce is a 20 byte hash value, right? So we now have two hash values. One that we've obtained from decrypting a series of encrypted artifacts, and a hash that the terminal has created from scratch using the original data and applying the known algorithm. So if you've got the two hashes, the terminal compares the hash, one to the other. If the recovered hash from the card is the same as the created hash at a terminal, then SDA is successful, which means that the card is authentic. It's not an attempt at counterfeit or or the card has not been cloned. It's a genuine card issued, by the relevant issuer. Which obviously, if the hashes do not match, then SDA has failed. Which then raises a concern around fraud. Okay, so I hope that was uh, fairly easy to understand. Things get slightly hairy now as we talk a bit about DDA. And I'm not going to spend too much of time on this. I mean, there are lots of manuals you can read, and I'm sure you could just go over the video again and again. But it's been my experience that you don't, unless you're working within the development community, working on actually writing programs and stuff like that for the POS, or working on the kernel. For an average person, average tester or average analyst, whatever it is, they don't necessarily need to understand the very low level details of how this works. Although I must say it is quite interesting, right? So if you find that you're having difficulty understanding it, excuse me, don't stress. Like I said, refer to the EMV core manuals. Maybe the way it's structured, it will be easier. Search for resources online. I'm sure you can find other resources. But the way I've positioned it is the way that I've understood it best over the years. But I'll be honest with you, it's not something that I remember offhand. I do have to refer to notes if I need to ever explain this to anyone. So if you are feeling a bit uncertain or apprehensive, don't worry. That's normal. This is a fairly complex topic to discuss. Okay, so DDA is very similar to SDA, except that unlike SDA where we're using a static piece of data, in DDA we use a dynamic signature. Okay, so in SDA, the card uses the same signature for every single transaction throughout the lifespan of throughout the card's lifespan. In DDA, every transaction has a different signature that is used. Obviously, I mean, logically, you can see immediately how significantly more secure this is over this model. Okay. Excuse me. So, as I mentioned, it's a high-level explanation. Don't stress too much if you start getting bogged down a bit. And yeah, please, if it's not detailed enough, please do your own research using the relevant manuals in order to get, if you want to get down to the bits and bytes of the process. Okay, so let's talk about what needs to exist on the card and the terminal in order for DDA to take place. So similar to SDA, we had a scheme public key index, same here, right? So the card has an issuer public key certificate, and that is the issuer public key, which is sent off to a scheme. The scheme signs it with their private key. They return it to us in the form of signature, of a certificate, and the certificate is loaded onto the card during personalization. What's different now compared to SGA is that for DDA, there is a specific, a new set of keys, an ICC private key. This is a card-specific private key used by the card to create signatures. So this key is unique to the card. So every card will have its own unique, private key set. Then we have an ICC public key certificate, okay, also new, which is created by the ICC public key, which is signed by the issuer. So you've got a private key on the card. There's a public key set. That is signed by the issuer using the issuer private key. This issuer certificate is then signed again using the scheme private key. Okay, so it's twice. So it's firstly encrypted under the issuer private key and then thereafter under the scheme private key. What also needs to exist, it's optional, is a DDoL, which is basically a DDA data object list, and this contains a list of data needed to generate a dynamic string called SDAD. Okay, the list may vary. So similar to how we said in SDA, we had that SDA list. which I said I gave a typical example, but it could vary. So it's the same with DDA, right? So it's under discretion of the issuer, but the bare minimum is that mandatory. It must have at least a terminal unpredictable number included in there. Okay. From a terminal perspective, pretty much the same in terms of we've got multiple CA public keys, and so we'll have one public key index per public key. Okay, so we've got 6 public keys loaded on a terminal, which means we'll have six indexes available. What's also present on a terminal is a default DDoL, a dynamic data authentication data object list, right? Must be present on a terminal in case DDoL not present on the card. So remember we said this is optional. So in the event where the card doesn't have it, the terminal will use the default DDoL for all the transactions. Right, so we know what's on the card, we know what's on the terminal. Similar to SDA, the terminal will compare the scheme public key index and it will find the one that corresponds. So the one that lives on the card, it will match it to one of the 6 keys that exist on the terminal. Okay, so we've located the scheme public key. Excuse me. The terminal will then use the scheme public key to resolve the issuer public key certificate. Okay, and once it resolves this, once it decrypts the data that results from here is obviously the issuer public key itself. Okay, so the issuer public key means the public key belonging to the bank. Okay, so now we've got the issuer public key obtained. The terminal takes the issuer public key. It applies the obtained issuer public key to recover the ICC public key, which is now getting more complex than the SD, right? So we're taking the ICC public key here, stored as a certificate. We use the issuer public key, and what that then gives us is the ICC public key. Right, so remember, we've got the ICC private key stored there, but we've got the ICC public key stored as a certificate. So by resolving it using the issue public key, we derive the ICC public key. The terminal stores the ICC public key temporarily. Okay. The card generates signed dynamic application data using the ICC private key. Right. So remember we said that there's an ICC private key that's stored. It will take a string of data that's unique to this transaction, and it will encrypt it using this private key. Right. So and this data is a combination of both card and terminal data. Right. So during this process, the card will obtain some information from the terminal, just as a terminal will obtain some information from the card. So the card says, I'm going to take this data that's made up of data I've got and data that I've received. I'm going to encrypt it under the ICC private key that was stored on me during personalization. And what's going to come out of there is signed dynamic application data, right? Signed data, which is it encrypts data with the ICC private key, and the result is signed dynamic application data, right? Your signed dynamic application data is made up of the following fields. Okay, so it starts off with a signed data format, a hash algorithm indicator, ICC dynamic data length, ICC dynamic data which is generated or stored on ICC, paired pattern, terminal dynamic data specified by DDoL. Okay, remember we said it must contain the terminal unpredictable number. Okay, so once the card has generated its SDAD, it sends it to the terminal. Remember we said that the terminal had obtained, it had derived the ICC public key. So it takes the ICC public key and applies it to the SDAD to recover the underlying data. Right, so take the public key, apply it there, and we should have the underlying data there. So the following data is retrieved, right? Recovery data, signed data format, hash algorithm indicator, ICC dynamic data length, ICC dynamic data, paired pattern, hash result, recover data. The terminal uses the algorithm indicator below. So an algorithm has been indicated here. So based on this indicator, the terminal will use the indicator algorithm and it will calculate a hash using these pieces of data which on this slide are not highlighted. Okay. So when it creates this, the output is a hash, right? You'll notice that there was a hash already supplied, right, in the SDAD. So what the terminal now has is that it has two hashes and it compares the two. So it compares the one that it received with the one that it generated. And if the two hashes match, guess what? DDA is passed and the card is cool. And if the hashes don't match, then yeah, DDA has failed. Okay. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Let's talk a bit about CDA. So combined data authentication is the same as DDA. So with regards to the use of dynamic data and having a card ICC key pair. The difference is that for CDA, we also include the application cryptograms that are generated as part of the first gen AC and second gen AC phases of the transaction. And later on, when we cover, first gen AC and second gen AC in a bit more detail, you'll be more familiar with the application cryptograms you're talking about. But basically, these cryptograms are produced during first gen and second gen AC, and these cryptograms are generally TCs, AACs, and ARQCs, which indicate the potential authorization outcome of the transaction. CDA makes use, so in addition to what we've done with DDA, it includes this cryptogram generation as well, right? And these cryptograms are actually generated using symmetric keys, right? So it's a good combination of an asymmetric process, but also including the output of processing done using symmetric keys, right? So CDA will therefore take place. So because there's a dependency now on first gen AC and second gen AC, what you'll find is that CDA cannot sort of take place at step 4 of an EMV transaction. It would generally happen, after first gen AC or after second gen AC, right, which is much later in the transaction. Right. Additionally, terminals may only support CDA in certain modes, which means certain transactional outcomes specific to online transactions may prevent CDA from being processed. Right. And so what that means, I think maybe if we just as we go along, that statement will become more clear. But basically, what you're saying is. An important thing to note is that CDA should always be processed for offline transactions, which means it should always be processed after first gen AC. Okay, so you'll find that sometimes some terminals don't allow the processing of CDA after second gen AC, right? But I think let's look at the table so that it'll be better understood. So there are 4 terminal modes affecting online transactions as follows, right? So if a terminal is set up with CDA mode 1, it means it is capable of performing CDA in first gen AC before going online using the ARQC cryptogram. And it's capable of performing CDA in second gen AC TC after response from the house. A terminal in mode 2 can only do CDA in first gen AC, right? It's incapable of processing CDA in second gen AC. Mode 3, basically mode 3, the terminal doesn't support CDA at all. So I think what you'll find is mode 3 is, if it's not discontinued already, it's fairly close to being discontinued as the CDA mandate becomes more critical to the EMV business. And mode 4, which is also less frequent, maybe saying that the terminal cannot support CDA in first gen AC, but it can do CDA in you know in second gen AC. So basically, after response has been received back from the issuer host. Okay, so the point I was trying to make on the previous slide is that uh, you know whether CDA is performed or not would depend on how the terminal has been configured to actually support CDA processing. Obviously, if it's set up as a mode 3, then it'll never perform CDA, right? Okay, so at the end of step 4 of the offline data authentication phase, the results of offline data authentication are recorded by the terminal in TVR. Okay, specifically in byte 1 bit 8, byte 1 bit 7, byte 1 bit 4, and byte 1 bit 3. Okay, remember we spoke of TVR, because the TVR is it's a report or sort of a record of what is happening in the transaction from the terminal's perspective. And I refer to it as a diary. It's personal note that the terminal is making during a transaction to record certain events, right? So we saw in the previous step that if there was data missing, it would have recorded that in TVR. So in step 4, what it would do is that it would record the it would record what it observed of the ODA process in TVR. Okay. And typically, the kind of events that it will record will be, was ODA performed? Was ODA successful? Was it unsuccessful? Uh, you know, and those just when we have a look at the TVR template, we'll be able to understand it in better detail. Okay, but for now, I think that brings us to the end of step 4, the offline data authentication phase. And so the next video that we will be discussing step 5, which is processing restrictions. Okay. So yeah, thank you very much for spending this time with me, and I look forward to catching you guys in the next video. Okay, cheers, bye bye.